I wish to tender my resignation.
Silence, Thorfinn. Stop acting the fool. I told you yesterday.
You mean, of course, Duke Leto Atreides, his father.
Jessica, you were told to bear only daughters to the Atreides. Jessica!
You remember the 1984 Dune, the sandworms, the whispers, that strange hypnotic fever dream that felt less like a movie and more like someone else's nightmare. But here's the part nobody tells you. The film you saw wasn't the film David Lynch made. Somewhere between the cameras and the premiere, Dune was cut in half. Entire characters vanished, whole storylines disappeared, and a 4-hour version, the one Lynch actually shot, was carved down to something barely recognizable. Most directors fight for their films. They argue, they negotiate, they release director's cuts years later. David Lynch did something else. He walked away. He disowned the movie. And for 40 years, he's refused to explain why. No tell-all interviews, no angry memoirs, no late career reflections, just silence. Which is strange, because this wasn't some tiny indie disaster. This was supposed to be the biggest science fiction film of the decade, a $40 million epic, a franchise starter, the project that would turn David Lynch into a Hollywood kingmaker. Instead, it became the one film he pretends never happened. So what was in that 4-hour version? What was cut out? And what happened in the editing room that made one of cinema's most fearless directors walk away from his own creation and never look back? To understand that, you have to start with the impossible promise that got him there in the first place.
The ones they call the witches, yet we are the secret.
The Rise. In the mid-1960s, Dune wasn't just another science fiction novel, it was the science fiction novel. Frank Herbert's book was dense, philosophical, and deeply strange. A story about religion as political weapon, about ecological collapse, about a chosen one who might save the universe, or doom it. Hollywood looked at it and saw two things: a massive audience and a massive problem. For nearly 20 years, directors tried to adapt Dune. And for nearly 20 years, the project collapsed under its own weight. Alejandro Jodorowsky assembled a 14-hour vision with Salvador Dali, Orson Welles, and a soundtrack by Pink Floyd. It never made it past pre-production. Ridley Scott circled the project after Alien, then quietly backed away. Too complicated, too big, too risky. By the early 1980s, Dune had a reputation, not just difficult, unfilmable. Then David Lynch said yes. It made no sense on paper. Lynch wasn't a science fiction director. He wasn't even a mainstream director. He'd made exactly 2 feature films: Eraserhead, a nightmarish industrial fever dream, and The Elephant Man, a tragic period piece that earned 8 Oscar nominations. He was an artist, a surrealist, a man who made films about dreams, bodies, and subconscious fears. And somehow, Universal decided he was the perfect choice to launch their next Star Wars. They offered him $40 million, a massive budget for the time, and something even more dangerous: creative control. At first, it felt like a perfect collision. Herbert's strange philosophical universe, Lynch's strange philosophical mind. He threw himself into the project completely. Months of pre-production, endless design sessions, every corner of Arrakis imagined in obsessive detail. The decaying palaces, the grotesque Baron Harkonnen, the heavy ceremonial costumes that looked more like religious relics than sci-fi outfits. This wasn't going to be Star Wars with bigger lasers. This was going to be science fiction as a nightmare, a prophecy, a hallucination. The cast looked like something out of a prestige drama. Kyle MacLachlan, a total unknown, as Paul Atreides. Max von Sydow, Patrick Stewart, Francesca Annis, even Sting, stepping in as a glittering, dangerous villain. Serious actors, serious money, a serious director. Everything pointed to a massive, respectable epic, something grander and stranger than anything the genre had seen before. Production moved to massive sound stages in Mexico. Entire palaces were built full scale. The Emperor's throne room wasn't a matte painting. You could walk through it, touch the walls, feel the weight of the empire around you. The sandworms weren't computer effects. They were enormous mechanical creations, 40-foot monsters that required teams of operators just to make a single movement. Day after day, Lynch shot the film like a man building a cathedral. Complex sets, elaborate costumes, dense political scenes, psychedelic visions, religious rituals, quiet character moments buried between explosions of violence and prophecy. The footage piled up, and it looked Different, stranger than the studio expected, darker, more symbolic, more complicated, and longer, much longer. When the first full assembly was screened, it ran close to 4 hours. 4 hours of conspiracies, visions, betrayals, and slow, creeping transformations. It wasn't a simple hero's journey. It was dense, moral, uncomfortable, exactly like Herbert's novel. For a moment, it seemed like the impossible had happened. Someone had finally filmed Dune, all of it. Universal executives watched the cut. They didn't panic, not immediately. They'd hired an artist. This was what artists did. But then the numbers came in. Running time, show times per day, audience attention spans, test screening cards. And suddenly, the 4-hour vision didn't look like an epic. It looked like a problem. That was the moment the promise began to crack.
You mean, of course, Duke Leto Atreides, his father.
The peak. By late 1984, everything was in place for the coronation. Universal wasn't treating Dune like just another release. This was supposed to be the next Star Wars, the next cultural earthquake. The marketing machine was already moving. Glossy magazine spreads, TV spots, toy plans, tie-ins, sequels quietly mapped out behind closed doors. They weren't selling a movie, they were selling a universe. And at the center of it was David Lynch's 4-hour cut. It existed, he had screened it. It was strange, dense, and difficult, but it was whole, a complete vision. A film that moved at the speed of prophecy instead of the speed of action figures. But the closer the release date got, the more the math started to matter. 4 hours meant fewer daily screenings. Fewer screenings meant fewer tickets. Fewer tickets meant no franchise. The conversations in the studio changed tone. This wasn't about art anymore. This was about logistics. Then the order came down. Not 3 hours, not even 3.5, 2 hours and 17 minutes. Lynch wasn't being asked to tighten the film. He was being asked to cut it in half. Imagine someone handing you a 1,000-page novel you spent 2 years writing and telling you to remove every other chapter but keep the story understandable. That was the task. He went back into the editing room and started cutting. Entire character arcs vanished. Political plots collapsed into a few lines of dialogue. The Bene Gesserit breeding program, once a slow, ominous thread, became background noise. The Fremen culture, built around survival, water, and prophecy, was reduced to quick, simplified scenes. But the most painful change was the ending. In Herbert's novel, Paul wins, but it's a hollow victory. His triumph guarantees a galaxy-spanning holy war. Billions will die in his name. The Messiah becomes the spark of catastrophe. It's not a heroic ending, it's a warning. That moral weight needed time. Time to show the visions. Time to feel the dread. Time to understand what Paul was becoming. There wasn't time anymore. So the ending changed. In the theatrical cut, Paul defeats the Emperor, and then it rains on Arrakis. Actual rain. Water falling from the sky on a planet defined by its absolute lack of it. The crowd cheers. The desert blooms. Credits roll. It was simple, clean, victorious. Everything Herbert's ending wasn't. Lynch delivered the new cut. 2 hours and 17 minutes. A film that still looked like Dune, still sounded like Dune, but no longer moved like it.
Jessica, you were told to bear only daughters to the Atreides. Jessica!
Half the vision was gone. And the premiere date didn't move. December 14th, 1984. The posters were printed. The trailers were out. The studio had bet everything on this moment. On paper, this was the peak. The biggest budget of Lynch's career. The widest release. The most expensive science fiction gamble of the decade. But inside the editing room, the film had already broken in two. And when it reached theaters, audiences weren't seeing the movie Lynch made. They were seeing what was left after it was cut apart.
As to their relationship with the spice, who knows?
The Fall. The reviews landed first. Incomprehensible, a beautiful mess, spectacular and completely confusing. Critics wanted to like it. You could feel it between the lines. The sets were astonishing. The costumes were unforgettable. The sound design was hypnotic. But nobody could follow the story. Too many names, too many planets, too many whispered thoughts crammed into too little time. The opening crawl tried to explain the entire universe in text. Characters announced their motivations out loud because the scenes that explained them were gone. Paul's internal monologue, meant to carry Herbert's dense philosophy, started to sound like accidental parody. Audiences were lost before the sandworms even appeared. Then the numbers came in. A soft opening weekend, sharp drops in the second. By the third week, theaters were already replacing it. Universal had spent $40 million, an enormous gamble for 1984. They needed a cultural event. They got a film that looked like a masterpiece but felt like half a story. But the real collapse didn't happen at the box office. It happened inside David Lynch. He didn't go on a press tour blaming the studio. He didn't write angry op-eds. He didn't even try to defend the film. He just walked away. When an extended TV version aired in 1988, running over 3 hours, stuffed with extra scenes and explanatory narration, Lynch refused to put his name on it. The director credit read Alan Smithee, Hollywood's official pseudonym for disowned films. And the screenplay credit? Judas Booth, a name that combines the man who betrayed Christ and the man who assassinated Lincoln. That wasn't professional distance. That was a wound. From that moment on, Lynch never directed another major studio blockbuster. Not once. He returned to smaller films, stranger projects, stories where he controlled the final cut. Blue Velvet, Twin Peaks, Mulholland Drive. He didn't just leave the system, he avoided it for the rest of his career. And when people asked him about Dune, he shut down. No stories, no behind-the-scenes regrets, no nostalgic reflections, just silence. Because the film audiences saw in 1984 wasn't the one he made. It was what survived the cuts. And that 4-hour version, the one that might have made everything make sense, never reached theaters. Pieces of it surfaced over the years, extended TV edits, deleted scenes, fragments of a larger vision. But the full cut Lynch screened for the studio? It vanished into vaults, trims, and discarded reels. Some of it is probably gone forever. Which means the most important version of Dune, the one that broke David Lynch's relationship with Hollywood, might be the only one we'll never see.
I wish to tender my resignation.
Silent Thufel. Stop acting the fool I told you yesterday.
The aftermath. Dune didn't end David Lynch's career, but it changed the shape of it forever. Before 1984, he'd been moving steadily toward the center of Hollywood. The Elephant Man earned 8 Oscar nominations. Studios saw him as a strange but promising talent, someone who could turn difficult material into prestige hits. After Dune, that path closed. He didn't make another big studio spectacle. He didn't chase franchises. He didn't try to prove he could play the game. Instead, he retreated into smaller, riskier projects where he controlled the final cut. Blue Velvet was darker, more personal, more disturbing. Twin Peaks was surreal, emotional, and unlike anything on television. Mulholland Drive felt like a dream that refused to explain itself. It was as if Dune burned away any desire to compromise. The film itself drifted into a strange afterlife. It bombed in theaters, but it never really disappeared. Cable channels kept it alive. VHS copies passed from friend to friend. A generation discovered it without the expectations of 1984, and the imagery stuck. The sandworms, the still suits, Sting's glowing eyes. People started calling it a beautiful failure, a flawed masterpiece, a film that almost worked. But Lynch never joined that conversation. While fans debated alternate cuts and missing scenes, he stayed silent. The movie existed. He'd moved on. End of story. Then, decades later, another director tried again. Denis Villeneuve approached Dune with a simple idea. Don't compress it. Let it breathe. His first film ran over 2.5 hours and only told half the story. The second part ran even longer. Together, they lasted more than 5 hours, and suddenly, the audience understood everything. The politics, the prophecy, the tragedy buried inside Paul's rise. The films were critically acclaimed, box office hits, exactly the kind of success Universal wanted back in 1984, which made Lynch's version feel even more tragic. He hadn't misunderstood the story. He hadn't overcomplicated it. He'd simply tried to tell it at the scale it demanded. The studio just wouldn't let him. Somewhere in another timeline, Universal trusts him. The 4-hour cut opens as a 2-part event. The story has room to breathe. The audience sees the vision intact. In this timeline, we got the pieces, and a director who never looked back. Final beat. 40 years later, David Lynch's Dune still doesn't exist. We have the theatrical cut he disowned, a television version he refused to claim. Fragments, deleted scenes, reconstruction theories, and silence. What happened in that editing room was powerful enough to change the course of a career. Powerful enough to make one of cinema's most fearless directors walk away from big-budget filmmaking forever. And whatever lived in those missing hours, the connective tissue, the emotional logic, the full transformation of Paul Atreides, remains locked away. Maybe the reels are scattered, maybe they're sitting in a vault, maybe they're already gone. But the version that mattered most, the one that could have made everything make sense, is the only one we'll probably never see. Some films fail at the box office, some fail with critics, and some fail so deeply they take an entire future with them.